Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the HR and Payroll 2.0 podcast. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Pete. And we have a repeat guest. We've had John Leon on a number of times, but I think we got a quick update to cover today.
Yeah. Exciting news out there. And I thought we had to bring John back on. So, John, welcome back to the show, man. It's great to see you.
Yeah, good to be back here again, Pete and Julie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Yeah, look, I was on LinkedIn about a week or two ago, I guess it was. Probably right there before Christmas, I believe, right? And you posted something calling it the most transformational compliance update on the topic of remote work in the last decade. And I was like, we got to get John on to explain what the hell's going on out there. Is this good? Is this bad? What does it mean? Yeah. So, yeah, John, what happened, man? What exactly are we talking about here?
Well, it basically caused tremors around the world because an earthquake went off back last November. And essentially what happened was the OECD released these rules around remote work and permanent establishment in particular. And so to kind of give you 50,000 feet view, we actually did a white paper a couple of years ago, and we asked companies, what is the biggest thing that keeps you awake at night when it comes to work from anywhere, like your employees working remotely internationally? And they all said consistently that it was permanent establishment. And so what happened is that industry said to the country tax authorities around the world and fed back up into the OECD that, look, you've got to do something about this. Because what was happening was a lot of people wanted to go back, work remotely abroad, maybe to visit their friends or family. But like a lot of corporate tax teams were saying, no, it's too much of a high risk. It can't be done. And so there was a recognition that at the end of the day, somebody's visiting their family abroad for a couple of weeks. They're not trying to avoid taxes. Like, just let them go and visit their family abroad at the end of the day.
Right? Yeah.
And that, work has changed. It's become much more prevalent. People extending holidays, for example. And so there was a recognition that something needed to be done here to make it much more practical and to really give a bit of guidance to tax authorities around the world and companies as well, to kind of take a much more pragmatic approach around the topic. I can tell you more about what was in it if you like, but feel free to ask any questions.
What is the OECD, right? It's the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. But what the heck does that mean? Like, what power do they have? Like, what are their remit, if you will?
If you look at, for example, double taxation agreements, you have two basic models of double taxation agreements that are typically negotiated around the world. The primary one you'd have in a lot of countries would be the OECD model, and you also then have the UN model. So a lot of countries, for example, in Europe, also, for example, in North America, places like Japan and South Korea, a lot of them would typically follow the OECD model, and then a lot of developing countries would follow the UN model. They have two different approaches. But essentially, to cut a long story short, the UN is a forum for discussing how, amongst other things, how we coordinate taxes and how we create rules and structures. And so the OECD have this OECD model that gives guidance to how tax authorities should set up double taxation agreements and resolve disputes. So one of the ones that you would have seen in the news in the last couple of years would have been some of the Pillar 1 and 2 discussions. Like one of the things, for example, the global minimum taxation rate of 15%. That was something that was very topical, continues to be topical in the news. It would have been the OECD coordinating and pulling together all of those discussions, for example. That would have been the forum.
Interesting. So what does this mean? Like, what exactly did they put out there? What does it mean?
Yeah, so
what's the change? Yeah.
To cut a long story short, there's a lot of different components to it, but the most essential to it is that if you're going to an OECD country, essentially, if they're going to be following these rules, what it says is typically before there was a question mark, if somebody's going to be in a country for more than 30 days, are they going to trigger permanent establishment? But what they've basically said is that you can be up to 183 days in a country in many scenarios and you won't trigger permanent establishment. So they've come down very firm with that. Now, at the same time, don't get me wrong, if you're in a senior sales generating role or you're a CEO, I wouldn't want to test the boundaries here. But what they've basically said under many scenarios, like if you're not very senior, you're not doing commercial activities in that country, you're less than 183 days, amongst others, you're not going to be creating permanent establishment, which is great because a lot of countries have had differing interpretations, differing approaches, and it's caused people to tear their hair out going, well, how do we even approach this,
Or avoid opportunity, which I hear sometimes.
Completely. I don't know. Have you seen it as well, Julie, from the market as well? Huh?
Yeah, for sure. Companies just will err at doing the same thing with AI, right? Like, just don't
Yeah.
do AI because we don't know how to govern this. And the same thing
Yeah.
was happening, I think, with conservative companies or conservative lawyers and companies who were saying, "Yeah, I don't want to get
Exactly.
into this."
Well, no, exactly. But even simple things like, for example, how you define a home office. They've more or less said if it's a temporary place like a hotel or Airbnb, that's not going to be a permanent establishment. Which, again, for all the three of us here, it's very common sense. But to actually have this really spelled out in the rules has
Yeah.
been massively welcomed. And I think it's a recognition that, work from anywhere. When I spoke to big companies 5 years ago, I said, look, this can be done. And they all said, no, it can't be done. It's too much of a risk, corporation tax. It's fascinating. So like this week, I went to Paris, like speaking at the OECD about the topic and recognizing all these countries around the world, they want to do something about it. They recognize it. But what's also interesting as well is while this announcement was transformational around permanent establishment in and of itself, you can clearly see that there's a lot more road to go here.
Quick before we move on, I think what I understand from our conversations is the OECD isn't binding laws, right? So there's still some
Correct.
interpretation, and you can still
Correct.
have very conservative minded folks. And the other thing is, I know I reached out to you directly because the first thing I did was which are the OECD countries, and I was like, crap, the one I'm looking at, I'm looking at or talking to somebody, and it's not one of the OECD countries. So what do we do next, right?
Well, what you have is the OECD. There's a list of the different members that they have, and they've member countries, partner countries. But the member countries are like a lot of the countries. For example, in Europe, you've also got the US, you've got the UK, you've got Japan, and there's also countries that are applying to become full members of the OECD as well.
Does it mirror the UN basically?
No, it doesn't. It's
Not
that's
quite.
not quite. Think off the
Yeah.
top of my head, I think you've got 38 members from the span the world from North America, South America, Europe, and Asia Pacific.
Okay.
So it play like countries like Australia and New Zealand are on it as well. But why it's important is because they set up this thing called this OECD Model Convention, for example, that sets the template for how bilateral tax agreements should be negotiated, and a lot of the rules, follow from that, amongst others, for example. But it's also discussion for discussing broader economic topics as well. But from the world of tax, it's hugely important because they help set the tone at the top. You can still have countries that set their own sovereign rules, but you can imagine when you talk about cross-border, that's where you're going to be running into, okay, what does it say in the double taxation agreement? Who's going to win? And it's in those double taxation agreements, that's where they kind of negotiate, okay, this is how we're going to treat this particular case. So when the OECD says this is how we're defining this, you can imagine the countries will be, it's very unusual for them to say, oh, we're going to go against that, for example, especially on a topic as big as this. It would cause chaos.
Yeah. Do you see that as the big win here, is the fact that someone has drawn a line in the sand and tried to create a framework at least?
Well, I think what's been really helpful here is typically with the OECD, they've been heavily focused on transfer pricing rules and global minimum tax. That's taken a huge amount of political capital and effort and brain power the last decade. Whereas I think the fact they've recognized that, work is changing. This is now, the cross-border movement of people, broader than work from anywhere, by the way. We're talking about broader global mobility. Like, this
Right.
is a thing now. We need to pay much more attention to it. And there's a lots more work to be done. Like, they did specifically mention a couple of really important things that they're going to be working on. And it was funny just to hear governments talking about, we know something's wrong here, that this isn't working. So that was
Yeah.
fun. That was
And
fascinating
we
to see.
agree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We agree.
There's a couple of things. If you want, I can tell you more about what were the things that they mentioned they're going to be changing. But again, you tell me.
Yeah. Please go
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah, I'd love to learn more. I'd love to learn what you learned in Paris at the meeting. I couldn't make it the other day.
That's right. Yeah. So what happened is we did a submission, work from anywhere. Basically, when that kind of global consultation came out, we did a submission on, here are the things you need to be looking at. Here's what's missing. So we said, look, well done, a massive clap on solving permanent establishment for work from anywhere. But by the way, you haven't really addressed contractors. You haven't addressed hire from anywhere. You haven't addressed payroll tax triggers. What about inconsistencies with Social Security? Digital nomad visas, the one thing that's consistent about them is their inconsistency. So we mentioned all these things, sent it in, and I basically got a call a week ago from the secretariat of the OECD. They said, listen, John, would you be up for coming to Paris to speak? So I was the last speaker of the whole event, and the whole thing was like televised all around the world. It was hilarious. But long story short, when I got there, one of the things I could see is probably the biggest things that were coming was they recognized there's too much complexity. There's too many rules. There's been an intention to do rules like economic employer with a goal that really just made things more complex. There's things like, for example, how you define the days and the work being done in social security rules is different from how you do payroll tax. So people like scratching their head, why are we doing that? Things like payroll tax triggers, where to even find the data for them, like hitting in some dusty closet in a dungeon somewhere, and rather than being openly accessible for the normal human beings trying to face these
Yeah.
problems on a day-to-day basis. But there was a recognition that if we're really going to have innovative economies in the next 10-20 years, we need to do a better job making life easier for the practitioners of global payroll, global
Right.
mobility, HR in the companies trying to face these rules. Because it's also not just them, it's also the tax practitioners, it's also the people
Right.
working in the tax authorities. It's a nightmare for everyone.
Do you think that this is good for remote work, for helping organizations engage remote work, or do you think it's more
Massively.
of a
Massively.
de-risk?
No, massively. I
Yeah.
think this is a real positive step. And the reason being is that for a lot of companies said, we're not going to do this. We would like to offer employees the flexibility to work remotely internationally, but you know what? It's too much of a risk. And
Yeah.
main reason very often was the corporate tax team and legal team that said, not comfortable. Well,
Yeah.
now the
Sure.
corporate tax teams, they don't have a leg to stand on now. I mean, if it's a non-OECD country, okay, maybe not.
Yeah.
I get it, but I expect there'll be a ripple effect from this in also the non-OECD countries in time as well. But I think the
That's
point
great.
being is like this really puts, I can't emphasize this enough, very pragmatic, practical framework that corporate tax teams around the world can go, okay, well, we can see this is the direction of travel here.
Yeah, absolutely. Any guidance to employers out there or just organizations that might, be trying to understand this? What would be your advice to them on this?
Well, I would say, engage with your local tax advisors that you deal with. Hopefully, they'll have a global network and a perspective on this. I think this is an issue that every tax advisor, every
Yep.
major tax advisor in the world has got eyes on. I think make
Yeah.
sure your global mobility and global payroll functions and your HR operations teams are aware of this, but have it filtered into the policy. What we're already seeing is that when we basically did a workshop in the Nordics 2 weeks ago. We asked them, what was your view on this? Will it impact your companies? And there was a couple of people that said, yes, we're going to be more open about work from anywhere policies because of this. But a lot of them were still sitting on the fence. They want to see how
Yeah.
this is going to play out over the next kind of 1 to 2 months. So I think, see what plays out, but speak proactively with your tax advisors and see what they make of it. But the sense we're
Yep.
getting is that it is transformational. Yeah.
Yeah. When you're out there looking at organizations, right, you work with a lot of different companies who are engaging remote work for different reasons. What are the characteristics you see coming from companies who are doing really well? And what do you see maybe as the things that trip companies up? In both, I think there's an experience to this on the employee
Yeah.
side and the business side, but then there's also that compliance underweaving. But what do you see the firms that are doing really well with remote work?
Well, I would say it's vertical and horizontal
Hmm.
alignment. So vertical alignment that the C-suite from right down, that there is buy-in from the C-suite and they recognize the benefit we want to invest in. That makes a big difference, but also horizontally as well, where there's cross-functional collaboration. Where it doesn't work is when there's silos. Where we see these
Yeah.
things fall down is if the C-suite don't fully understand it and don't buy into it, or you can very often find the HR leaders want to push this, they implement it, the policy goes well, but all of a sudden the C-suite just change their mind. Now,
Yeah.
I will say that's very rare. For people to actually do a work from anywhere policy, they do see great results. I mean, extremely rare I've ever seen it being pulled back. But,
Yeah.
of course, you've seen with RTO, for example. But funny enough, much rarer for work from anywhere from what we've seen. Now, the other side of it is, again, going back into the cross-functional collaboration. That's where, it's important that mobility and payroll and reach out and link up rewards and the talent acquisition team and retention teams to be able to really understand, okay, how is it moving the
Yeah.
needle and measuring it in a very objective way. If it's not moving the needle and it's not retaining talent, well, you're not going to keep it going. But again, thankfully, what we have seen, there has been, we've been actually told vast majority of our clients have said it's in the top 3 most actively engaged benefits.
Listening to organizations that I know are weaving in their benefits, to your point, 4-day work weeks and remote work and things like that, they're having tremendous success when they're being very deliberate about it, I think.
Yeah. When employees, are hearing the work from anywhere, or they have a situation, they really, don't know where to go or who to start asking. It sounds like, as you described the horizontal alignment and the vertical alignment, it sounds like HR should be your champion, right? And if
Massively.
Yeah.
and they're the ones, where if you're hearing a dead no from HR right from the get go, then you probably don't have a lot of hope in any time soon of getting that cross-functional alignment that makes it operationally possible. Is that how this kind of plays out? You go to HR,
Agreed.
HR might be a fan.
Yeah, well, what we find is different is that because if you think of like the pyramid of a company, it's that bottom up groundswell of people saying, "I really need this," and what you find is this a benefit everyone wants? Not really, but we do
No.
find
Yeah.
there's about probably 50% of employees it's a really important one. So for maybe
Yeah.
50%, not hugely important, but for those 50% that have family abroad, friends abroad, or they want to extend a holiday, that are into travel, whatever reason, but especially those that have family abroad, and like all of us here, many of us
Yeah.
and many of your listeners will have family abroad, and so being able to access remote work in that perspective and be able to travel abroad,
Yeah.
that's a really sticky one. Once you get access to that, we've seen and spoken to lots of people who will move companies because of it. So what you typically find is they'll
Yeah.
first go to their manager and or their department head, and they'll make a really strong case to HR, and use that department head to make the business case for HR, and they'll go and
Yeah.
approach parallel HR. But we do find it's very often those business leaders in the companies that are pushing the HR and the C-suite to implement it. Yeah.
I mean, that's what's new because, global mobility has always been in existence in larger firms, but it's been for that top tier of
Yeah.
folks, right?
Yeah.
And so, easier to make an argument, I suppose, a little bit more push and pull. But now we're talking about it more of a groundswell, right? Of our workforce that is interested in and could be hugely incented by
Do you know what's
this.
happening now, Judy? Is basically global mobility teams, for example, very often are come back and saying, "Okay, no," or HR teams, "You can't do it." And people are going into like Gemini and ChatGPT saying, "Well, look, I've checked as a digital visa, or what's going on here, and
Yeah,
as a
yeah,
right to work," or they're pushing back. Like they
Yeah.
really are. They're coming
yeah,
armed. So it puts HR in a very difficult position. So
It
yeah,
does.
yeah,
and
Yeah.
I don't envy.
It's risk and cost, and all of those things have to go into
Correct.
fact. It's not as simple as just saying, "Oh, I live here now." Especially we talked about these folks that were tooling around in RVs all over America during the pandemic and around that, after that time. And I don't know that all those folks were probably, you know, their employers were aware all the states and places they were in that
undeclared.
probably collected, yeah, should have declared some earnings. But John, just to kind of round this out, man, what if anything can we expect next? Like, what happens next? How do folks stay up to date on this? Like, what should we
Yeah,
expect?
but the best place, and I'll share with you links to the OECD program and how this is going.
Mhm.
But definitely stay tuned to the OECD links, because what's happening here is I think there's a groundswell of a recognition that there's a kind of like a house cleaning has got to be done on a number of different topics. Very ambitious topics, but simple things that can be done will be rather than having different definitions and rules in payroll tax and social security, what if we actually had social security leading the definitions, which was fascinating. I hadn't
Mm.
heard that one before.
Yeah.
But there's lots of innovative things that, if they did it, it would be huge. It would have a huge impact for HR and mobility and payroll leaders. It would make a big difference. Now, probably the challenge is it will reduce the consultancy fees for some tax advisors, but that would be a lot. There would be a lot of benefits to companies, and I think also, to be fair,
Yeah.
the tax advisors, everyone recognizes it's just too insanely complex. We've got to make life easier for each other.
For sure, for sure. It's got to be a fair system, right? To be able to function with these things. I hate the gotchas in taxes and
Yeah,
compliance. It's like, look, just show me the rules.
correct.
Let me work within the rules and function within that. But
Yeah,
John,
correct.
any predictions? Like, what are your sort of outlook here on remote work and just global mobility in 2026? I think it's going to be a big year for that. I can tell you why after this, but just curious your thoughts. Like, what are you hoping to see? What do you think we will see? Any prognostications here?
Well, I think if you talk about in the world of, for example, tax, the big question is they've dealt with work from anywhere. How are they going to deal with hire from anywhere, and how are they going to deal with taxing, for example, agents,
Yeah.
like LLMs? If someone's, you've got two people, both earning the same salary, but somebody's creating a lot more value by amplifying, 10 different Claude or other agents, whatever it could be, for example, and one is only using a little. How do you tax that? How do you tax
Yeah.
the difference between a
Interesting.
human being and robotics?
Yeah.
Automation. I don't have the answer to
Do
that.
you see entities talking about that yet?
No, I haven't heard anyone around the world talking about it yet at the
Yeah.
moment. I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is talk about it, but it was something I think it's a really tricky one. Where does the human being stop, and where does the automation robotics
That's a
begin?
great point. Yeah.
Hey,
Interesting.
John, will you back up for just a second on hire from anywhere? I think it would be interesting to like, what's the difference? What are the special subjects around hire from anywhere?
So work from anywhere is when somebody's working remotely abroad temporarily, like going for a few days, weeks, or months. Hire from anywhere is when a company has got a skills that they need. So if you look at the
Hmm.
pyramids, the bottom up is work from anywhere, but top down is hire from anywhere. Hire from anywhere is when I want to get a specific skills in a country that I don't have an existing footprint in. How do I engage them? Is it by employer of record? Is it
So now
independent
we're into the
contractor?
EOR. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. I would actually,
Okay.
but it's actually more into skills, because if you think of it like skills can be done via AI. It can be done via human being in AOR, by fractional skills, via contractor. We could create a talent hub there using a legal entity, for example. Even register as a foreign employer. There's lots of different angles once you
Yeah.
identify the skills. So if you have skills in the lead, then the next bill is bit how are we going to engage those skills? Is it AI automation, or is it via human? If it's human, okay, what's the next level down of how we engage that? Is it
Yeah.
a work contractor entity or whatnot? It's tricky.
I've been writing a little bit about this, and it's going to come out soon. But I feel like this is partly the future of EOR, is being that sort of data and orchestration layer to help with when do I, where do I, what's the risk, what's the cost, what's the
Agreed.
how do I know what to do when. I think there's a lot of data that's out there. It needs to be brought together. I know you guys do do a good bit of that as well. But I also think it's about helping people become more fluid with their talent, right? Talent fluidity, I think, I didn't coin that, but I know it's been out there for a while. I think this agility is going to be applicable when you have mechanisms like work from anywhere, work from home, and various different flexibility enablers to go and find the right people at the right time, the right place, all that sort of thing. So all
Yeah.
very, very timely for
Agreed.
sure.
No, agreed.
Yeah.
It is very exciting. I will say that's one thing that especially coming out of that meeting in Paris, you can see there's a groundswell of momentum that I think just
Yeah.
stay tuned. There's going to be a lot of big things happening over the next 2 years in this space.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we want to, John, keep
It's
us updated,
exciting.
man.
Yeah.
We're going to put these links in there, put links to your content and your LinkedIn and site, work from anywhere team, right? .team,
WFA.team. That's the one. Yeah,
WFA.team.
that's it.
We're going to share all those, and yeah, just stay, keep us updated, man. We'll have to bring you back on for a quick update, but it's always great to see you, and I really appreciate it. And look, there's a lot going on here. Like I was just saying, just this week, Julie, there's been 2 or 3 pieces of news around. Shout out to Boundless. Boundless was acquired. That's one we're going to talk about.
Yeah,
There's some
congrats to you and team.
EOR.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Congrats to them. It was great. And there's been a couple of other EOR happenings and global mobility happenings that I think we'll have to talk about here pretty soon. So hot
Yeah.
year for this, man. It's already, what is it? We're 3 weeks into January. It's already getting exciting. So I love it,
Tis the
man.
season. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Well, John,
Excellent.
thank you as always, man. Appreciate you coming on. And yeah, we'll be back very soon, guys. Thank you.
Thanks very much.